What's going on, everyone? Today I'll be reviewing Hunter x Hunter. Hunter x Hunter is a very popular and loved show. However, it has one big issue which I'll talk about later in this video. Comment your thoughts on Hunter x Hunter down below. As a quick summary of the show for anyone who hasn't seen it, it follows the story of a young boy named Gon who sets out to become a hunter in order to find his father who left him in his aunt's care at a very young age to complete his goals as a hunter. Gon wanted to see what made being a hunter so amazing that a father would be willing to leave their child behind. Along the way, Gon meets several people who he'd form strong friendships with and go on great adventures with as hunters. Continuing on with my review, there will be spoilers for Hunter x Hunter, so if you have yet to watch the show but don't want to see any spoilers, you can skip to the timestamp on screen to see my rating. Hunter x Hunter is a show I very quickly took a liking to after starting it, and I think a big reason for that is the style of it. It had a strong familiarity despite the fact that I had never seen it before, and it reminded me a lot of Naruto, which at the moment I consider to be my favorite anime of all time. So I think that's what really caught my attention when I first started, and it's probably the reason why I liked it so quickly. Not only was the vibe of the show great, but the animation was beautiful, the story was engaging, and the characters are top tier. The thing I loved so much about the characters in Hunter x Hunter is the fact that almost every character serves an important purpose. And throughout the show, Gon was almost never the strongest. Usually in a lot of shows I've watched, the main character is usually the strongest in their universe, or at least very close to the strongest by the time the show ends. However, this is not the case with Hunter x Hunter. Another good example of this is of course Killua, as he and Gon travel together for most of the show, and generally have a very similar power level. As I mentioned earlier, I feel Hunter x Hunter has top tier characters, so I'm going to talk a little more in depth about some characters I really liked outside of Gon and Killua. I'll start with Hisoka. Hisoka is a very interesting character to me, as he's not quite a villain, but at the same time he's not a good guy either. Now, Diddy activities aside, Hisoka as a character really does a good job of feeling like the main antagonist for the first chunk of the show, while still not technically even being a villain. There are still several times throughout the show where we see Hisoka help Gon and his friends out despite the fact that he also really wants to fight Gon. Speaking of Hisoka, now is a good time to bring up the Phantom trope in Kurapika. I really enjoyed the York New City arc, which was focused around Kurapika and the Phantom trope, especially since very early on we are introduced to Kurapika's hate for the trope and his reasoning why. Seeing how Kurapika created his Nen ability for the sole purpose of defeating the trope was really cool, and watching everything happen was super entertaining. I'd say the York New City arc was probably my second favorite behind the Greed Island arc, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I also wanted to talk about how I feel like the Phantom trope as a whole are great characters and villains. Of course, Hisoka was a part of the trope for a little bit, with his main goal being to fight Chrollo, who's the leader of the trope. Now, one thing I will say is I wish we got to see more of the Phantom trope after the events of the York New City arc, and although we technically did see the trope again during the Chimera Ant arc, it was really brief and they were missing quite a few members, so I feel like there was still definitely more to be explored with them as a group, and Chrollo in particular. Now, before I get into the Greed Island and Chimera Ant arcs, I briefly wanted to discuss the Hunter Exam and the Heaven's Arena arcs. I really enjoyed both of these arcs, and I feel like they were perfectly executed and acted as great introduction arcs. Throughout these arcs, we obviously learned the direction the story was taking, and we met some intriguing characters like Leorio, Wing, and many other hunters. Also, during the Heaven's Arena arc, we were introduced to Nen, which is essentially the base of the power system in Hunter x Hunter, so I can confidently say those two arcs were excellent. Moving on to the Greed Island arc, this was easily the best arc in the show in my opinion. We were introduced to a lot of new characters during this arc, one of which quickly became one of my favorite characters, and that would be of course Bisky. Bisky was probably the most valuable teacher Gon and Killua had throughout the show. It was really nice seeing Gon and Killua's progression spike when training with Bisky. I really enjoyed the whole aspect of Greed Island essentially being like a video game in real life, and that Gon's dad had designed it for him to get stronger. Also, the conflict in this arc was really entertaining, especially since Gon was there to enjoy the game rather than race through it, and he wanted to do it the right way rather than killing people to progress, which is what his father didn't want. Now, last but not least, I'll talk about the final two arcs, being the Chimera Ant and the 13th Hunter Chairman election arcs. The Chimera Ant arc was both amazing and lacking in some areas. On one end, it introduced some amazing characters like Kite, Knuckle, Moro, Miriam, Kamugi, and many more. On the other end, the first 60% was poorly paced in my opinion, and it also introduced some very unlikable characters like Poof. Now, with that being said, I don't think any of the characters introduced were bad, even if they weren't likable, but I do believe the biggest issue was the pacing. Every other arc in the show was a reasonable and enjoyable length, but until the final section of the arc, it kind of felt like it was being dragged. However, despite that, I really did enjoy the arc as a whole. In particular, I really liked the story with Komugi and Miriam, as well as seeing Gon kind of lose himself and go somewhat rogue after what happened to Kite. But in particular, an episode that really stuck to me was episode 135. It had a very similar emotional feeling to that of Dandadan episode 7. However, the difference was that we spent so much more time with Miriam and Komugi that when that episode came, it really hit hard. It was easily one of the most beautiful yet heartbreaking episodes I've ever watched from any show. Now, I'll finally talk about the 13th Hunter Chairman election arc. This arc was definitely short and sweet. We are introduced to Killua's younger sister Alluka in this arc, along with many of the best hunters in the world. We also finally got to see Gon meet his father Jing during this arc, and I feel this arc just ended the show on a good note. I personally loved seeing Killua act to save Gon and free his sister from the horrible conditions she was living in, as well as finally seeing Gon complete his goal of meeting his father. And another nice thing about this arc was getting to see almost all of the characters we met throughout the entirety of the show. Finally, to wrap everything up before my rating, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about. Hunter x Hunter has a lot of great things about it, and it doesn't have much that I would consider to be bad. However, there is one spot where it suffers greatly, and that one spot is the fact that we may never get to see it get a proper ending. Although it is currently ended in a pretty good spot, it's clear that there's still a lot more that needs to be explored. And with the current situation of the manga, and the fact that the last episode came out over 10 years ago, there's not really a bright future to see Hunter x Hunter actually get the ending it deserves. And in my opinion, this is by far its biggest downfall, which is truly tragic. Now, time to give my rating for Hunter x Hunter. I personally give Hunter x Hunter a 9.3 out of 10, as it excels in so many areas and is a very enjoyable show to watch. However, it has one really big issue that holds it back from being even better. Thank you for watching my review of Hunter x Hunter. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. Comment your thoughts on Hunter x Hunter down below, and have a great rest of your day. Peace.